Paria Veisi's disappearance has shaken Cardiff to its core, and the mystery surrounding it only deepens with each passing day. What began as a routine day on April 12, 2025, turned into an unimaginable tragedy. Her sudden absence, her car abandoned, her life left in limbo, raises questions that no one has been able to answer. Was it a tragic accident, or is something far darker at play? This case isn't just unsettling, it's haunting, leaving more questions than answers. Let's rewind to the beginning. Paria Veisi was a woman with a calm demeanor who blended into the bustling streets of Cardiff like anyone else. At 37, she lived what many would consider a well-rounded, fulfilling life. A daughter, sister, and a friend, Paria was the kind of person who made an impression without trying. Her friends often described her as someone who always showed up for others, whether it was a quick text to check in or lending a hand when needed. It's hard to imagine such a woman could suddenly vanish without a trace. Her career was one that reflected her responsible and dependable nature. She worked as an office manager in a busy office in the Canton area of Cardiff, a district known for its vibrant, urban energy. In her job, Paria was known for her organizational skills, always keeping everything running smoothly. She didn't mind the hustle and bustle of her professional life, as it was just another aspect of her routine. Outside of work, Paria found peace and balance through fitness. She was dedicated to her gym workouts, going to the gym a few times a week after work to maintain her physical health. Her passion for fitness wasn't just about staying in shape, it was also her way of disconnecting from the demands of her job. The gym was her place of refuge, a space where she could unwind. She loved doing everything from weight training to cardio. It was more than just a hobby for her, it was a lifestyle. Friends recalled that in the months before her disappearance, Paria had seemed a little different. It was subtle, but those closest to her noticed she appeared slightly more withdrawn, less her usual outgoing self. At first, no one could put their finger on why. Paria was a creature of habit, so when she missed a few get-togethers, it was unusual but not alarming. She had always been punctual and reliable, and it was uncharacteristic of her to just disappear from social gatherings without any word. Still, the changes were small, nothing overtly alarming at first. She continued to show up for work, go to the gym, and take care of her responsibilities. Yet, friends who had known her for years could feel a shift. It wasn't just the missed dinners or the subtle change in her tone when they spoke. It was as though there was something else, something she wasn't saying. But despite these small shifts, no one could have predicted the shocking disappearance that would follow. The afternoon of April 12, 2025, began like any other for 37-year-old Paria Veisi. As the clock struck 3 p.m., she completed her workday at the office in Cardiff's bustling Canton district. The area is vibrant, filled with a hum of activity from local businesses, coffee shops, and people making their way to their next destination. It was a familiar setting, one that had shaped Paria's routine for years. The rhythm of her day was predictable: a few hours at work followed by time at the gym, and eventually, home to her family. On this particular day, Paria was dressed in her usual post-work attire, a black zip-up gym top over a red shirt, black trousers and trainers. She was the type of person who maintained her health with a consistent fitness routine, and the gym was a place where she found peace away from the demands of her busy professional life. After work, she often made a stop at the gym for a workout, something that had become second nature to her. Fitness was not just a hobby, it was a lifestyle. It was her way of staying grounded and finding a sense of balance. And on this day, it seemed like she was simply going about her business, just as she always did. Before heading out, Paria had mentioned to her colleagues that she planned to head to the gym after work. She had no specific plans after that, no hint that anything unusual might be on the horizon. She was just going about her normal day, driving her black Mercedes GLC 200. A car she had recently bought and had become attached to. There was nothing out of the ordinary about her departure. She left the office, exchanged a few pleasantries with her co-workers, and then walked to her car. Her movements were casual, routine. She didn't seem hurried or anxious. She waved as she got into her car, and within moments, she was on her way out of the parking lot, driving off toward the gym. But little did anyone know, That would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The beginning of the uncertainty. As evening descended upon Cardiff, the first hints of something wrong began to surface. By 6 p.m., Paria's family had grown concerned. She had always kept in touch after work, especially if she planned to stay out longer than expected. But this time there were no calls, no messages, no check-ins. Her phone went straight to voicemail when they tried reaching her. This wasn't like Paria. She was dependable. She wouldn't just disappear without any word. Her family knew something was amiss. They didn't need to speculate. They knew. They tried reaching out to her friends, checking if anyone had seen her or heard from her in the last few hours. No one had. Paria's absence was starting to feel more like a mystery, and less like a simple misunderstanding. By 9 p.m., the worry turned into something much deeper. It was no longer just about an occasional delay. It had evolved into an eerie, gnawing feeling of dread. The family immediately contacted the police to report her as missing. It wasn't a decision they made lightly. Paria had never gone missing before. There were no red flags in her behavior leading up to this day, but the circumstances surrounding her absence were impossible to ignore. The police responded swiftly, and by midnight, a formal investigation into Paria's disappearance was underway. The authorities had little to go on at first. There were no signs of foul play, no cryptic messages, and no witnesses who could shed light on where Paria had gone after leaving her workplace. The abandoned car. 3 days later, a discovery made the case take a dark turn. On April 15, 2025, Paria's black Mercedes GLC 200 was found abandoned on Dorchester Avenue, a quiet residential street in the Penellan area of Cardiff. It was parked on the side of the road, just a few meters from a row of houses. There were no signs of forced entry into the vehicle, and no evidence that Paria had struggled before leaving the car. At first glance, it appeared to be a normal abandoned vehicle. But for those involved in the investigation, it was much more than that. Why had Paria parked her car there, so far from her usual route? The car was just sitting there, undisturbed, as though she had gotten out and walked away. There were no clues to suggest any sort of altercation had occurred. It was as if Paria had simply disappeared without a trace. The question began to circulate among investigators. What could have happened? Why would someone leave their car behind and vanish without explanation? Witness accounts and early investigations. As police began their search in the area around the abandoned car, they spoke to witnesses who had been in the vicinity around the time of Paria's disappearance. One neighbor reported seeing a woman fitting Paria's description walking near the car around 4:30 p.m., just an hour after Paria had left her workplace. However, the witness didn't know Paria personally and couldn't confirm if the woman was, in fact, her. Other neighbors reported hearing unusual noises in the area, but nothing that seemed to indicate a struggle. There was a sense of confusion. The details didn't add up. Paria's car, her only means of transport, was found neatly parked, and there was no sign of damage, no broken windows, no physical evidence of anyone trying to force their way into the car or remove it from the area. The only thing that seemed strange was the simple fact that it was left behind in such an unexpected location. The police quickly expanded their search, scouring the neighborhood and questioning everyone they could. They even checked the nearby surveillance footage from local shops and private residences. But there was no clear video footage of Paria, nor any indication of who had been near the car just before or after it was abandoned. It was as though she had simply evaporated. The fear intensifies. The more time that passed, the more apparent it became that something had gone terribly wrong. The police expanded their investigation, moving outward from the scene of the abandoned car. They began canvassing areas further from Penellan, following every lead, every tip. But the question still lingered in the air. Where was Paria, and why had she disappeared? Her family, meanwhile, struggled with the unknown. They were in limbo, unable to move forward, unable to let go. They pored through Paria's life, looking for answers in any detail that could explain why she had left and where she might have gone. Could there have been someone from her past who had reappeared in her life without anyone noticing? Could she have been targeted for something? Or was it just a tragic mistake? A disappearance that would remain unsolved forever? And as the investigation unfolded, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Paria's car wasn't the only piece of evidence. It was the beginning of a trail, one that had the potential to lead somewhere darker than anyone had anticipated. A glimmer of hope. Or was it? By April 19, 2025, 4 days after Paria's car had been found, the police received an unexpected tip from a local resident. The person claimed to have seen a car matching the description of Paria's vehicle parked outside a home in Penellan, a house not far from where her car had been abandoned. The tip was anonymous, but it was enough to prompt police to investigate the area. What they discovered would shock everyone involved in the case. At the residence, the police found Paria's body. It was located in a secluded part of the home, hidden from plain sight. The discovery sent a ripple of disbelief through the investigation team. How had Paria ended up in this house? Why had she been taken there? The house, it turned out, was owned by a 41-year-old man from Penellan, who was immediately arrested and charged with Paria's murder. But the case didn't end there. A 48-year-old woman from West London was also arrested, facing charges of preventing a lawful burial and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. The police were now dealing with more than just a murder investigation. They were beginning to unravel something far more complex and troubling than anyone had imagined. Theories began to form around the idea of foul play. Perhaps even a personal vendetta. Was Paria being stalked? Had someone in her life been watching her for weeks or even months, waiting for the right moment to strike? The police began piecing together evidence that suggested Paria's disappearance wasn't a random act. There were signs that someone had planned her abduction, that they had been following her and waiting for the perfect time to make their move. Paria had been a target, but for what reason? The investigation was far from over. With each new detail uncovered, new questions emerged. Was this a case of domestic violence? Or was it a result of something darker and more calculated? What secrets were hidden in Paria's life that no one had yet uncovered? Despite the arrests and the ongoing investigation, many questions still remain unanswered. What drove the people involved to commit such a heinous act? Was Paria targeted for a specific reason? Or had something gone horribly wrong in the course of a crime that was meant to stay hidden? The case of Paria Veisi's disappearance and death is far from closed. The mystery surrounding her death continues to haunt those who knew her and the people involved in bringing her killers to justice. Every piece of evidence that emerges only serves to deepen the mystery. What happened to Paria that day? And why did she end up in a quiet house in Penellan, far from her normal routines, her family, and her life? The answers are still out there, and until they are uncovered, Paria's story will continue to haunt the streets of Cardiff. After the discovery of Paria Veisi's body in Penellan on April 19, 2025, the investigation shifted into high gear. The police were no longer working with the limited details of a missing persons case. They were now faced with a murder investigation. But as often happens with such cases, the questions began piling up faster than the answers could be found. The first question on everyone's mind was simple. Why had Paria been killed? The police had no idea who would want to harm a woman like Paria. She was well-liked, responsible, and seemingly had no enemies. But as they delved deeper into her life, they uncovered something far darker than anyone had imagined. Theory 1. The connection to the 41-year-old man. A domestic dispute. The man arrested in connection with Paria's death was a 41-year-old local resident from Penellan. The initial theory was that he may have been involved with Paria in some way, perhaps even romantically. Investigators wondered if the two had been in a relationship that had turned violent. A search of his property revealed disturbing details. Evidence suggested that Paria had been in the house at least once before, but it was unclear whether she had gone willingly or if she had been taken there against her will. The police found several items that were significant. A set of keys that didn't belong to the man, a bloodstain that appeared to have been scrubbed from a carpet, and an old phone that had been wiped clean but could still hold valuable data. Was it a domestic dispute that escalated tragically? Perhaps Paria had discovered something about the man's past, Or maybe he had a history of violence that no one knew about. Investigators began pulling records, searching for any signs of prior criminal behavior, but they found little to connect the man to violent crimes. The idea that this was a premeditated murder based on personal animosity was not completely ruled out, but it was far from proven. Theory 2. The role of the 48-year-old woman. A conspiracy unfolds. Then, there was the 48-year-old woman from West London, who had also been arrested in connection with the crime. She was charged with preventing a lawful burial and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. But what was her connection to the crime? Was she an accomplice, or was she simply trying to cover up a crime she hadn't committed? At first, police thought she might have been Paria's stalker. They examined the woman's relationship with the 41-year-old man, and they soon discovered a troubling connection between them. They had been friends for years, and there were hints that they had been involved in some sort of illegal activity together. Could it be that the woman had been helping him cover up his violent actions? As they dug deeper into the woman's background, the theory that she was merely an accessory began to crumble. The woman's alibi didn't check out. She had been seen in Cardiff just days before Paria's body was found. She had also been in frequent communication with a man in Penellan, but their phone records showed something more chilling. They had been communicating during critical times, the moments just after Paria's disappearance. It was clear that something larger was at play, and the investigation into the 48-year-old woman suggested that she may have been actively involved in the murder itself. Did she know more than she was letting on? Theory 3. A connection to a previous unsolved crime. The police were also keen to explore a possible link to previous unsolved crimes in Cardiff. Several months prior to Paria's disappearance, there had been a series of break-ins in the Penellan area. The victims had all been women, and the burglaries had taken a disturbing turn in some cases, with items being stolen from their homes. But more troublingly, there were instances of surveillance equipment being placed in the homes. Could Paria have been targeted as part of a larger scheme? Perhaps she had been watched long before the day she went missing. Was she just one of several victims in a string of crimes? Investigators began reviewing old case files, cross-referencing incidents that had occurred in the same area. They found that the previous break-ins had stopped abruptly, just weeks before Paria's death. Could this be linked to the people involved in her murder? Theory 4. The victim's past. Was she involved in something dark? As they continued to probe deeper into Paria's personal life, investigators began to uncover an unsettling truth. Paria's life may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Her friends and family had always known her as a kind, hard-working woman. But was there a hidden side to her? The police began speaking to Paria's friends, her colleagues, and even her social media followers. What they found was unexpected. Paria had recently started to communicate with people she hadn't interacted with in years. She had been attending online forums and groups where individuals discussed conspiracy theories, controversial topics, and fringe ideas. At first, this didn't seem unusual. Many people spend time on these platforms, engaging with new ideas and exploring different perspectives. But some of the individuals she had been speaking to had darker histories. Had Paria inadvertently stumbled into something dangerous? Were the people she had been conversing with connected to the 41-year-old man or the woman from West London? Investigators began combing through her online conversations, looking for any hint that she had crossed paths with dangerous individuals. What they uncovered was a complex web of communication that painted a picture of Paria as someone who had, perhaps unknowingly, become embroiled in a web of lies, manipulation, and deceit. Theory 5. A random act. Is this all just coincidence? Though the evidence pointed to foul play, there was a theory that some investigators couldn't shake off. Could Paria's death have been the result of a random act? Could she have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Some police officers entertained the idea that the crime was an opportunistic one, a spontaneous act committed by someone with no prior connection to Paria. It was a terrifying possibility, one that painted the city of Cardiff as a far more dangerous place than anyone had realized. If someone could be taken without warning, without reason, what did that say about the safety of the community? But this theory lacked concrete evidence. There were too many oddities about the case. The abandoned car, the lack of struggle, the involvement of multiple people. Didn't add up. The more they investigated, the more they were convinced that this was not a random crime. The theories collide. A web of lies, deception, and murder. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the theories about what had happened to Paria were far from simple. There was no single explanation that fit the facts of the case. Instead, investigators found themselves untangling a complex web of lies, deception, and murder, one that spanned months if not years. The involvement of the 41-year-old man and the 48-year-old woman seemed to be more than just a coincidence. The evidence suggested that Paria's death had been planned, but why? What did they stand to gain? Was it money, power, or revenge? Or was this something more personal, a twisted game that had spiraled out of control? The more they uncovered, the more unsettling the case became. And with each new piece of evidence, the theories about what had truly happened to Paria continued to evolve. What led to this tragic end? Was it a stalker, someone who'd been lurking in the shadows? Or was there more to Paria's personal life than anyone knew? What was the true motive behind her death? And what was the relationship between her and the two individuals arrested in connection with the crime? Was it a stalker, a cover-up, or something worse? The answers remain elusive, and investigators continue to piece together the details of Paria's life and the tragic events that led to her death. But one thing is certain: her family deserves justice, and they will stop at nothing to get it. This case still haunts investigators. What do you think happened? Was there something hidden beneath the surface that we'll never know? The truth is out there, but it's still unclear. If you want to hear more about this case and others like it, subscribe for more unsolved mysteries. Share your thoughts in the comments, and join us as we continue to search for the answers.